I'm Alexandra Sleator, Career Accelerator, and welcome to this last edition for 2014 of Career Tips. Career acceleration means that together we can achieve your career aspirations faster than you would on your own. We can work on a range of career challenges, starting, obviously, with career progression. Together, we can devise an appropriate strategy for you to get that promotion that you deserve. But we can also help you repackage your skills so that you can make a lateral move, a bid for something different, and enhance your learning. We can help you with your career right here, right now, in order for you, in fact, to position yourself gradually for further advancement. And that we do by working on fundamental skills like communication, in particular influence and persuasion and conflict management. We can work on change, which is a recurrent theme these days, team motivation. We can work on personal effectiveness and personal brand. We can work on presenting with confidence, and of course we can work on your leadership presence. That's just a few examples. Last but by no means least, we can work on career transition, and that could mean either making a comeback into the workforce if you've been on a break, or redefining success if you want to do something quite markedly different. What is that new job, and in what new industry would be the question. This is just to give you a flavor of the type of conversations that we can have that will help you in a time and cost efficient way to make your career aspirations come true. Anyway, let's delve into the last material for this year. And at the last video, we were talking about a simple and yet powerful model to help you make sense of those never-ending workplace challenges. If you've missed that video, the URL is appearing right now. The model, you may recall, is called SCARF, and it's anchored in that fundamental principle of the brain, which is that the brain's core function is to protect us. And it is only once the coast appears clear to the brain that we can relax and that the brain looks at our well-being and enjoyment. And we looked at SCARF, which, as you can see on the slide, is an acronym for the 5 domains of social experience in the brain. We looked last time at certainty and autonomy, which are the domains of inner experience, which is the domain of the self-perception of experience. And today we're going to look at the outer dimension of human experience, which is that we're going to look at how we perceive human experience in the context in which it occurs. Again, the outer dimension of experience, and that is relatedness, status, and fairness. So without further ado, let's start with relatedness. And it will make sense why I have rejigged it relative to how the letters are ordered in the SCARF acronym. Relatedness, you see, is simply about whether you belong. It is our brains making that often snap decision and often wrong decision about whether somebody is friend or foe. And again, reminding yourself that this portion of the brain that we're talking about is thousands and thousands of years old. In fact, it's probably 40,000 years old at least. And so think of those early human civilizations where people were living in caves, even the beautiful ones with the wonderful art on the walls. Clearly there, an outsider would often be trouble, and so it was very important to know who was in the group and who was out. Now today this is something that we feel in social settings. For example, think of this party that you are arriving at and your friends have not yet arrived. Or you simply have gone to a party where you don't know very many people. That sense of nervosity is your brain wondering whether you're in an environment that is friendly or not. If you start a conversation with someone, your brain will relax because you've made that human connection. The brain feels safer from that relatedness standpoint. In a work context, it's arriving at a meeting where you find that you don't really know any of the other participants and wondering whether you belong there. Then, if you find that you too have something to to share that the topic of the meeting is something you're knowledgeable about, then that will give you the way in and you will belong. So that's the basic function of relatedness, that friend of foe. Now, based on how we grew up, our brain will naturally make us gravitate to some people and naturally make us move away from others. And that is actually why diversity is so hard, because our brains are programmed to categorize between in and out, between friend or foe. And so people that we perceive as different, for whatever reasons, again, that have to do unconsciously with the person we've become, make us treat those people we view as different as foes. Right? So when you're uncomfortable with a colleague at work, resist that temptation, which is, of course, prompted by your unconscious brain, to walk away from them. Indeed, stay with the discomfort and engage, do small talk and find if you have an affinity. The minute you will find a common point, the fact that you both love football or golf or whatever else, your mind will relax and switch from foe to friend mode. So it's well worth it, because in the office, engaging proactively to develop your network, is quite fundamental to better collaboration, to career progression. Now, conversely, think about the people that you've given your trust to. Are they really worth it? Or was it just your brain that, again, unconsciously, without much rational thought, made them look attractive? And are they really your friends? So that's really what relatedness is about. And in the office, again, because we come into contact with so many people that we have no choice about, it is important, I find, to understand that we have those basic reactions, coming from our brain managing this relatedness domain that, naturally help us connect, but also take us away from some people. So that was relatedness. Now let's move on to status, and you will see the natural progression there. Status is no longer about whether you're in and out. It's about the fact that you're in the group, you do belong, but the question is, what is your rank in that group? Where do you fit in the pecking order? And in a workplace context, I'm not just talking about the org chart. We all know that even though someone may be at the top of that food chain, we can say, oh yes, the CEO of that company, he's not really running the show, it's really the CFO who's doing it, or that head of business unit. So it's not about the formal status of things, it's about how people perceive seniority. And seniority is indeed something that has to do with the org chart, but not just. If we think very clearly about the boss's PA, for example, on the org chart she's just a secretary, but the truth is that access to the CEO gives her a much greater sense of status, and everybody knows that she's the gatekeeper to the CEO. So that's a much greater status than the org chart would imply. If you think of your team, when you first arrive, when you first join, it's more a matter of relatedness. How well, how quickly are you going to integrate and belong in that team? But after a while, it becomes also about status, because the question is, where is your relative place there? We have sometimes in teams junior folks that, again, from an organizational chart point of view, look like they're at the bottom of that pyramid, but who, because they have developed a strong connection to the leader of the team, have in fact more status than somebody who has a greater title than them. So this is really what status is about. And it can come from indeed your position, it can come from how vocal we are. When we speak, when we are vocal, we have more visibility. And rightly or wrongly, visibility can equate with a perception of status. What are the threats that we can experience to status in the office? There's a number of them, and let me talk to you about, for example, speaking in meetings. I've talked about meetings from a relatedness point of view, in the sense, do you belong there? Do you know the people? But it's also about your contribution to that meeting and how people will view it, and that will impact your own sense of status as well as how they view you. If you have something to contribute to the meeting, let me encourage you to always do it. I know some people who say, well, I'm in agreement with what's being said, so I don't need to repeat it. Well, sadly, you need to, because if you act as a wallflower, people will assume you have nothing to provide to the group, and as such, their sense of your status in that collective, in that moment, in the meeting, is going to go down. So make sure that you speak up in meetings, if only to thank people for inviting you. Sometimes we don't have a lot to say in a meeting, we're more learning from others. But when we thank them for that, we take our place in that meeting. We say, I came here to learn, and that was my place. It's not as strong a place as I came here to add value, but it's a much better place than one of silence. Clearly also, there is all the opportunities for us to mess up. You know, sometimes we don't do something so well, and when we are incompetent, we have that cringing feeling, because our own sense of status goes down when we don't do something so well. And then when others notice, then of course it makes it worse, and that's, you know, that's that sense of embarrassment that we feel because our status is lowered. So how to address a threat to status when we've been incompetent? Well, turn it into a learning opportunity. When you learn something, it rewards you in two domains. It does reward you in autonomy that we talked about last time, because you have a sense of capability that is enhanced. But it does also reward you in status, because when you showcase your new learning and other people notice, your status in the group is enhanced. So if you've done something not well, if you are being stretched outside of your comfort zone, don't worry, embrace the learning, and that will make you feel good in two parts of your brain. The other thing about status is advice and feedback. And the fact is, when we're given advice, we are placed in a position that's inferior, right? Because the person who's the advice provider implicitly says, I know more than you. And when we tend to disagree with that, but even when we agree that that person is indeed probably more informed than we are, we have a natural tendency to resist advice. And that's because of that part of our brain that is concerned with status. Because taking advice is admitting that we are lower than them in the ranking order, and that's something our brain is adverse to. So this explains our natural aversion to advice. And then with feedback, it's even greater, because feedback is more formal. You know, you have those year-end, mid-year, whatever moments where you sit down with your boss. And there you really feel that, you know, superiority, that difference in official status of that boss being above you. And that's why we tend to dislike feedback moments for that and many reasons. And so in order to cope with advice and feedback better, it's again that chance to look at it from a constructive point of view, to look at the learning opportunity, which again will enhance your status when you showcase that new learning. And of course, feedback doesn't need to be just negative with you needing to remedy something. It's the positive feedback. So in feedback conversations, I encourage people to give you also the positive of your contribution and enjoy that moment. And of course, if you've contributed strongly, the rewards of your contribution should come your way in terms of recognition, hopefully financial compensation, hopefully promotion sometime as well. So, and all of those are of course great to make you feel good about your status. And that's why we really crave career advancement, not just because we want to do more, we want to manage people, we want to go overseas, have more responsibilities, but because that sense of status in our brain drives us to want to work our way up. So it's a very ingrained element in ourselves, that wish to grow ourselves. So that was a few examples of threats to status and how to cope with that. And finally, last but by no means least, is fairness. And again, isn't it absolutely amazing that our brains have such an ingrained sense of something like fairness? And we see it in the brain imagery that we can now have access to, how a person will react to two different experiences. If a person is given 50 cents versus another one being given $1, they will feel differently than if they're given $10 and their neighbor is given $50. Now that's an interesting one to consider, because after all, $10 is more than 50 cents. But no, it's that relative experience that is fundamental. And the person who gets $10 versus 50 has only gotten a fifth of what the other person got, whereas the one who got 50 cents got half, which is bigger. So you can see that fairness in the brain is not concerned with some sort of notion of absolute justice. It's really about that relative experience, which is all that relatedness and status and fairness are concerned about. They're concerned about the environment and therefore the relative value, so to speak, of human experience. Now, the neuroscientist tells us that it is that sense of fairness in the brain which is at the root of any form of human altruism, devotion, for example, Mother Teresa, but also, more down to us, charity work, volunteering work. When we engage in those activities, we contribute to making the world a better place, and that's rewarding our sense of fairness. Sadly, in the workplace, there are many opportunities for fairness to be threatened. The obvious one is compensation. Most of us will worry about how we are paid relative to our colleagues who do the same kind of job. And that's why there is so much talk around pay inequality. So often, of course, gender-driven, but of course, sometimes race. So pay inequality is a big theme, and that's really around that fairness piece. In any case, anti-civil rights movement will have been about, a group that feels ill-treated, that feels it has not a fair treatment, campaigning for greater equality. In the workplace, pay inequality is a recurrent theme that has not been, and probably won't ever be, sorted out. But beyond the reward element, it's also about work. Are you given the right kind of work for your skill set? If you're given work that doesn't play to your strengths, either something that's too easy or something that's too hard, that will probably activate a threat in the fairness part of your brain. Restructurings, any form of change in the office, is also likely to create a sense of threat in some of us. For example, there's a merger and this new team comes and we are absorbed. Apart from the fact that our status may also be negatively affected, it's the fact of saying, why are they on top of the pecking order? They're just the same as us, but because they bought us, they're viewed better. That's unfair. Redundancies, why has this guy been laid off and not this other guy? And so on and so forth. Corporate changes, reorganizations are rife with opportunities for fairness to be threatened. And last but not least, and rather more subtly, something about values. Most companies these days have official values, and they are written in nice brochures, they're websites, they can be written all over in the lobby. But sadly, in many cases, the values that are actually practiced, the one that you can see being manifested through the behavior of the people in the company, are different. And that dissonance between the official and the practiced values causes a sense of unfairness. And when we look at the reasons why people resign, the first reason they will often say is, I didn't get along with my boss. But the second reason is something around, I just didn't fit in. And that is typically because the person's own values are clashing with the practiced values, not necessarily the official values, but because of that dissonance in values and behaviors. And so the person cannot tolerate it because it's too unfair. And to give you a sense of how important fairness and unfairness are, what we have noticed also from the brain imagery is that if we view someone as unfair, let's say we've observed a colleague being unfair to another colleague, then the relatedness is switched off. So that person, who may have been, a good colleague of ours, becomes in our brain a foe. The relatedness is switched off. When relatedness is switched off, we cannot anymore sympathize with them. And in fact, that's where the German concept of Schadenfreude comes in, because that's, rejoicing at the pain of another. So when we see unfairness, not only do we switch off and disconnect, but we actually wish ill to the person who is unfair. So that's a very interesting thing, that very negative reaction that we have to unfairness. So there, the unfairness. So how do we fix unfairness? We've talked about how to address status, for example, with learning, and we've talked about how to address relatedness by proactively building rapport, and last time how to build up autonomy and certainty. How do we reward fairness? The truth is that in the workplace that's going to be hard, simply because you will typically not have enough control. And indeed, if you feel you've not been paid as fairly as you should have been, your capacity to engage and say, I deserve a pay increase, or I deserve more money, or whatever, is going to be limited. You may protest, but whether it actually goes anywhere is, of course, very much of a question mark. Same thing, if there's a merger and the org chart is being reworked by the powers that be, you will have, sadly, most of the time, very little say in terms of where you end up in the new firm. My only advice, bearing in mind these constraints, is one of transparency, which is to transparently communicate about the issue, and to do so proactively. If you're concerned about your pay, talk about it, not when you've gotten the pay slip, but several months before, and build a case. If you're concerned about your role post-merger, then proactively engage around the value you bring and how you'd like to make sure that you can continue to contribute in the wake of the merger. Again, it may not actually have any impact, but you will have given it a shot, as opposed to staying silent and see where the chips fall. So you will have more a sense of agency, and that at least will reward your sense of autonomy. So there's something positive going on. And you will also maintain your own sense of status. You will try to keep that place in the collective as high as possible. So while it may not actually fix the fairness piece, it does something beneficial in other domains. But again, it is limited, and that's the frank truth of it. So there you have it. Issues around relatedness, status, fairness can make us feel, in the case of relatedness, excluded, can make us feel, in the sense of status, disengaged, and in the case of fairness, demotivated. Lots of opportunities in the office to feel bad for one reason or the other. And the sad news, and I promise that's the last one, is that a given situation could very well trigger threats not just in one but several of the domains of SCARF. I talked about feedback earlier and how that's a threat to status, because in a formal feedback situation your sense of being lower than your boss is quite acute. But feedback doesn't just sadly threaten status, it can even relatedness, because if you're getting negative feedback, your brain will switch to viewing your boss as the foe. And because you're never really sure what feedback you're going to get, certainty is also going to feel somewhat threatened ahead of the feedback conversation. So that's an illustration that a particular situation can activate quite a few of the SCAR's domains from a threat point of view. But what I hope that I've done for you is given you some tools in order to read those situations that make you uncomfortable at work, so that by unpicking them, you're able to make sense and to address. If you realize that your status is threatened, it's a bit different than if you think it's your autonomy, and the way that you will manage that in order to make yourself feel better is going to be different. So hopefully this is a tool not just to make sense, but also to strategize, to enhance your well-being at the office. So on this note, let me wish everyone a wonderful festive season and a lovely and relaxing end to the year 2014. It will be my pleasure to continue the conversation next year, but until then, take very good care and bye-bye.